dear colleagues, especially in the back, if you could take your seats. I'm very sorry, you bear with me. It's I'm trying to get us through also to maneuver through this conversation. I think it was, yeah, you saw the sequence. We had the ministers yesterday. We had an outlook by the Polish Undersecretary in the evening on next year. We had now the Commission, and it's quite logical that as part, I think it will stick to in the German-speaking world, the Gesamtkunstwerk. We have the Gesamtkunstwerk of the agencies on stage. And we had actually, for those who joined the tech panel yesterday, we had also a representative of EU LISA joining actually that panel. So we were really very happy and yeah, really delighted that we have the representation from the EU agencies, and as we heard, who will play a crucial role in the implementation of the pact. I mean, in this panel, I think it's very straightforward. We want to hear from you, of course, about your roles. That's very technical, but also the interaction, Johannes mentioned it as well, I mean, with the member states, and that it's, you know, for those who have been in there for longer, I mean, as he said, you know, sometimes it was perceived in, you know, it's an obligation or we have to, and it's not seen positively, but now it might actually be changing because it's crucial, the support you're providing from the agencies. But we also want to look ahead. In the end, I mean, and I would invite you not to stick to the answer, we fulfill our mandate and that's it. You're all very senior, and I'm sure that you want to work towards a goal for your own, but I thought also for your agencies. Yeah, we would like to finish with that. And I will stay very short. You can all read CVs and so on, but we have with you, and we're really delighted. Nina, you are you're every year, almost every year at the Vienna Migration Conference. It's a pleasure to have you. Nina Gregori, the Executive Director of the European Union Agency for Asylum. I leave it with that, but you have been there, second mandate now. Yeah, so you have been there for a while, and it's a pleasure having you. We have with us Mrs. Sirpa Rautio, Director of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, or FRA as it is known. You have started beginning of the year?
1st of March.
1st of March, that's beginning of the year. So, pleasure to have you. I think also here from the Commission we heard that there are new roles. It's in law. You published recently the guidelines. We'll come to that. Yeah, really thank you very much for joining us. And last but not least, you know, we can't really have a panel with EU agencies if we don't have a representative also from Frontex, and Stefano Failla, who's the director of the European Integrated Border Management Intelligence Division at Frontex. Yeah, you have done many things, but we'll also come to that. You're dealing also with the intelligence and the agency's analysis, foresight, very interesting, and we'll come to that as well. But yeah, to start with the agency's roles, I think it's very, very straightforward. We don't have the time to go into every detail. I think, Nina, for you, for the EUAA, and when you look at, you know, I sort of overviews, I mean, you turn the pages and you say, oh, again, EUAA, and here guidelines, and here support. So it's really, yeah, very extensive when we look at legal, administrative, operational obligations under the pact. Yeah, so in short, so how would you summarize basically your role when it comes, we have the common implementation plan, lots of reference to the UAA, and also, as I asked also Johannes, bit sort of first experience. Does it feel, I don't know, might be a stupid question, does it feel different now, your work, than from before the pact?
Let me start, Ralph, first by saying, of course, thank you. I mean, I'm really happy and excited to be here again, indeed. I think that the Vienna Migration Conference has really developed as a great platform to exchange views, to also exchange not only, let's say, political and policy developments, but also give a positive, let's say, insight in the practical work and the practitioners that we are. Of course, we also have the chance maybe to highlight, I mean, the importance of that part. And I'm happy to be here with that. I need to say that, of course, the core mandate of our asylum agency is basically the implementation of our common asylum system. And of course, it's, the core mandate is to support member states and institutions in doing so. And the pact, as you know, of course, it's the next level, of course, of creation of common asylum, European asylum system that has been, in a way, as an idea, and not really old. It all started in Tampere with 1999 Council conclusions, and here we are. So we were first happy and excited that the European Commission proposed pact legislations in the form of regulations. With that, of course, we receive a codification in a way when it comes to asylum also, right? And in this respect, of course, we do hope that this, with the implementation, will bring us to more convergence. And that's our, let's say, main goal in this respect. We've started in the agency with preparation for the implementation long time ago, basically at the beginning of this year, when there were still, of course, negotiations ongoing, but we need to think, of course, and prioritize the work ahead of us. So we've taken so-called program approach. We have prepared a huge program based on 4 pillars. So the first thing that we needed to think through is what the agency needs to do, basically to be able to implement, of course, the pact legislation in the sense of the support to the member states. You can only imagine that the agency has done all the work that has been based before on the legislation as it is, and of course the pact brings new legislation. With that, we need to change everything that we have ever produced, meaning all the training modules, all the guidances, all the tools, the indicators, everything that, of course, we have ever, I mean, had, as I said, we need to change and restructure, and we need to also maybe do new things, of course, according to the legislation. So that was our first pillar, and here I need to say that we have enormous support from our management board, of course, because they are very much involved in the work, because they are the one to basically adopt the guidances and the tools that the agency needs to produce. And the members of the management boards are, of course, our member states members and commission, and UNHCR is there as an observer. They have the observer status. So we need to redo or prepare as new, I mean, more than 120 deliverables, and we have a huge, of course, time frame and, of course, the actions that are there under the 10 thematic projects. So the second pillar is our support to Commission, and we're happy to contribute to the common implementation plan preparation. We did so the qualitative and quantitative work for the Commission, and we're also members of the country teams. So we're happy to, in a way, help Commission or support Commission in the assessing of the situation. We are looking very much forward for the national implementation plans that, of course, the countries will need to produce now. And that brings me to the third pillar of the program, which is indeed, I mean, help member states to, in a way, invest in NIPS, so to prepare them for the NIPS preparation, so the National Implementation Plan preparations. Here, they will be able to use the tools from our first pillar to put them in the National Implementation Plan and not to, in a way, duplicate the work. For example, they will need to definitely have additional staff that will work in the implementation of the pact. They will need to train the staff, so we will prepare the training programs, modules, so that they will not have to do that in this respect. And last but not least, then the fourth pillar is the implementation of the pact itself. Of course, our agency is there to support implementation with our, let's say, regular or permanent support, but also with our operational support. We are still very much present in the 11 member states with our operational work. And of course, we will see how this will then be shaped and formed beyond June of 2026, when indeed countries will need to be prepared to implement the pact as its, let's say, entirety.
And thank you very much. And I think, you know, when we have discussions about, now until 2026, I mean, sort of almost nothing is happening, and it's almost an insult.
Yes,
it's almost an insult to what is happening, you know, in the on the side of, you know, your agency, but also the others and others who look and prepare for implementation. Right? It's probably something which is difficult to communicate because it's preparation, it's adapting, and so on. But out of the 4 pillars you have now described, anything where you see, or you see a topic where you see that sticks out a little bit, that there's more support needed than something else, or it's newer as...
Well, I mean, everybody, I mean, that was already discussed yesterday. I think that the whole focus for sure is going to be on the obligatory border procedure, and for that, many of the countries, you know, I need to say that we did analysis back in 2022 in December, when we recognized that, of course, 19 of our 27 member states already are doing part of the border procedures in a way. I mean, under the basis, of course, on the basis of current legislation. So, but still, of course, what we need to do now is to prepare countries for the seamless border procedure and screening, of course, regulation implementation, because the deadlines for that are really short. And in this respect, we are now, and we've prepared together with the European Commission the model for adequate capacity, as Johannes mentioned in the panel, for the screening and border procedure implementation, so that the countries will know exactly how much resources they will need for the, of course, adequate capacity handling. We are now preparing also the model for the workflows. We are not preparing the model for multi-purpose hubs where they will, of course, implement both of the procedures. So there's a lot of investment there. But I would also want to point out to the two things that maybe have not been really emphasized, and they're a bit of a elephant in the room. That's basically the efficiency of judiciary, because of course also judiciary will need to be ready and prepared for the fast implementation of the procedures, especially when it comes to the asylum procedures linked, or the asylum border procedures linked with the return procedures and potential detention. So here I think that, I mean, the agency is in a way equipped to help also judiciary. We do have our courts and tribunal sector, but of course that's a huge task that in a way is a bit also on the let's say shoulders of the member states, and the independency of judiciary that of course, I mean, definitely will stay as of course it is and as we know it. That and the training, obviously. I mean, we invest a lot in training. We have more than 50 training modules that indeed will be able to offer to member states. We have trained so far 90,000 people, so we will continue to do so.
Thank you. No, it's very, I think it's very useful to get really also the numbers and really the insights, when otherwise, you know, we read about your work and so on, but I think it's really, it's very impressive what you've been doing. Now, we said something, you know, codification, it's law, and part of it are also the references to fundamental rights, to the role of the of FRA, the Fundamental Rights Agency. Yeah, I think to start with, I think would be interesting to hear from you a bit, sort of to define, to explain the role FRA has, will have, is preparing. You came out, as I said before, already with guidelines. Yeah, Sirpa.
Thank you very much, and also a pleasure to be here. It's my first time, a very impressive environment and audience. Well, of course, I'm sandwiched here between two fairly large EU agencies, but we are from the same family. We are Justice and Home Affairs agencies, and we do have very good cooperation since long time. I'm in this position only since 1st of March, but already we have managed to meet in different places, and indeed at the working level, the cooperation has been going on for a long time. Maybe I have to put a little bit into the context first, what FRA is doing, to understand also the difference. I think it's crucial. I'm not trying to minimize the impact of FRA and fundamental rights. I think it's at the core of the credibility of this system. It's one of the building blocks to have compliant fundamental rights, compliant border management, migration management. But it has to be, of course, clear that FRA is an independent agency, not an executive one, and that we have a very broad mandate. So if I calculate quickly, migration asylum is perhaps some 10%, bit above of how we use our resources, because there are many other tasks. And FRA is, of course, especially since the crisis, the first one, 16-17, has been investing a lot, sort of in proportion to our resources. But I think FRA is best known for its data collection in other areas, and different parts of the Commission are, of course, putting pressure on us to continue other work as well. So the data collection on anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, racism, gender-based violence, these are in fact taking more of our resources. So it will be interesting to see how we will be able to balance between DG Just, DG Home, DG Other Connect. We also work on those issues. I just wanted to say that because with colleagues, they have not a more simple mandate, it's very complex, but it is sort of one line, one work stream, and with Frontex. So for us to be able to deliver, and it is more on guidance and expertise than operational. For us, it is crucially important to also work together with the other agencies so we can put our work into context of the overall operations in this area, but also the overall pact implementation. I also want to say, since sometimes fundamental rights and fundamental rights actors are seen as an obstacle to efficiency, and this is not the case. We fully understand the situation. We fully recognize the legitimate security and other problems that are at the moment. And I think for us, mandate has always been, since we don't do the monitoring, it is the Commission, the massive Commission that does the monitoring of the implementation. Our role is different. So it's more on the guidance. So our work will focus on the safeguards and rights part of the pact. And in some ways, of course, it's a continuation. I mean, many of these tools and instruments have been in place. For us, I think it will make it a little bit more simple to actually focus our work in the key areas. The pact defines the contours of what the member states have to do. Within that, the fundamental rights compliance continues to be important. And within that, we have a few tasks that we will be focusing on within the pact. And one of them I will address later are the need to have also national monitoring of the compliance. A lot of attention goes to Frontex, and rightly so. Frontex Fundamental Rights Office is soon as big as the entire FRA. The Frontex rent is as big as our entire budget. So, you have to put things also into perspective. But the role is important, and we have not been waiting. We have already worked on the guidances, and I think that will be really important for the credibility at the member state level, but also for the functioning of the system, that the national actors, in terms of monitoring the screening regulation and also the border procedures, works effectively. Otherwise, there will be challenges, and I think this is the best investment in preventive type of work, that you have good actors cooperating with the authorities and ensuring the compliance. We, of course, will do also other things. Child rights should be mentioned, the guardians. There will need to be investment also at the member state level for looking after, children who are caught up in this situation, etc. But that would be the role. Guidance, expertise, of course, working with EU institutions, working with member states directly, and with other actors and stakeholders.
Thank you, and giving us really a very, sort of a bit of a reality check also about, your mandate. And we speak pact, but then, what it means on your side. And when we speak about operationalization, I think this is part of it as well, but also then at the very end, for instance, guardianship, or where we see that at national level, that means actually different actors. When we speak about migration, we have our usual actors in mind, but we need actually, we see actually the need to bring in different ministries, different stakeholders, as you rightly pointed out, and we'll come to that as well. Stefano, Frontex. Frontex has anyway seen, discussions about mandate. It didn't need necessarily a pact or the pact to add more things, and expectations, I think, towards Frontex. But again, same question a little bit now with the pact. Frontex role, I think it's, when we speak about border procedure, I guess there is a link. We have screening and so on, but also then We speak about border management mainly when it comes to Frontex. We can come back to that as well. Not to forget, you have, since the last change of mandate, also big responsibility when it comes to returns, as we, we discussed just now as well. But over to you.
Indeed, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting us, and my congratulations to you and your staff for the organization of a conference which is has not only been impeccable from a hospitality and logistical point of view, but I'm really impressed. It's my first time attending this by the level of the debate, because actually I see that we're bringing together all the relevant facets across the migration management spectrum, and this is actually the way to go. Instead of piecemeal approaches, really a good understanding of the phenomenon in its complexity is really very, very welcome. And of course, we stand ready to contribute from our own small part, yet significant part of the equation, which is the border management part. And I'll be speaking precisely on that. So as to your question, to go into the specifics, also taking a look at your very authoritative big clock in front of here, I will be very specific. We are called, according to the Commission Implementation Plan, to contribute basically to two other building blocks of the implementation plan. The first one being the new system for the borders, where we are primarily involved in providing enhanced support to the provisions that are entailed in the screening regulation, and hopefully there's going to be some space to talk about that more in detail. And on the other hand, to continue supporting and enhancing, yet again, our support when it comes to the return, so the back end of border management, if you will. Now, we do this and we intend this in two broad streams, which more or less also reflect the two broad streams of the mandate of the organization itself. One is the very visible operational support that you actually see at the external borders of the Union through our personnel in uniform, in addition to our civilian staff. As you know, Frontex has a standing corps which has been implemented since 2020, which has now grown to a rough figure of about 2,300 officers. But also and of course by operational support, I also include support, the whole range, the whole panoply of services that we provide in terms of the return. And on the other hand, also, let's say, the information or intelligence part of the equation, which is the one that I'm most familiar for obvious reasons with, which is also meant to not only provide operations with information input in order to have ever effective operations on the ground, but also, and increasingly since the 2019 mandate, to provide the European institutions, and by the European institutions I also include, of course, the member states, with knowledge product that can help decision makers shape the right decisions. So also in this case, we will adopt the same kind of approach when supporting the measures that stem from the Pact. What do I mean by that? When it comes to the screening regulation, there's, of course, the possibility of providing ever more qualitative profiling of irregular migratory flows towards the Union, so to provide a better understanding. Our mission in the end is provide a pre-warning function to the European Union, also to help identify the vulnerables, also to refer for the parts of our mandate that refer to the role of Europol in the equation, so the so-called Article 90 referrals when it comes to the identification of suspects. The screening regulation provides an incredible opportunity to enhance let's say, the evidentiary basis for us to provide ever more qualitative insights and foresight to the authorities, in addition to providing better services, including to migrants themselves at the border. And the same thing applies to the part of returns, where we support, as you know, as many of you know, the whole spectrum from identification through reintegration through the actual return operations. And we will also enhance our analytical support to returns. We have very, very close cooperation with my dear friend and former Frontex colleague, Mari, the EU Returns Coordinator, who sits today in the audience, and we intend to provide also there ever more integrated analytical support to provide decision makers with the good evidence that is needed to make the pact actually come into reality.
Right, thank you, and thank you for making that that link, I mean, on the one hand, very operational. I mean, we could have the whole discussion about sort of assets probably and so on when it comes to border management, but you're underlining actually, and it comes, you're responsible for that, sort of knowledge products and in the end, when you create a system, and there is the glue also to the system. You can have all sorts of things in place, but yeah, there is something, I mean, there must be analysis, and in the end then, as you said, also foresight, the question of where we are going with that, and it has to be based on well, intelligence, which, as you said, you have now additional tools to gather. I want to come back now again to, you said already, I mean, with fundamental rights, and you said already with the guidance, that's one of the key measures you're tasked with, but it has to function at the national level. I mean, national monitoring systems have to be in place, and yeah, I think that would be interesting to hear from you how you see that as a system. Again, we said before, there are 27. I call it the beauty of the EU. I think it's really great. I mean, it's the difference, but then each time when we want to create a coherent policy, it becomes a little bit complicated, very different challenges in the countries. Yeah, so what do you see? How will you work with the member states?
Thank you. Of course, there will be a number of issues, but I will try to concentrate on a couple of main ones, starting from the independent monitoring. As I mentioned, I think it's a key. And of course, this is a very specific type of monitoring relating to two of the instruments, screening and asylum. But this is, of course, at the national level, landing in a system that already exists. I mean, I think almost all the EU member states already have national human rights institutions. Most of them have ombuds institutions. We have also the equality bodies, and there's a new directive on them as well, which will put a transposition obligation for the national member states. So again, although this is a very specific task, has to be looked into in the context of what already exists and also what is lacking. It's very clear that we will have very different situations in most of the member states. Some have already very robust, strong monitoring systems comprising, and also who are already working on border monitoring. I'm thinking of the Police Commissioner, for example, with good resources, multiple mandates, and already during the crisis with Ukraine, Belarus has been doing it. Of course, there will be additional obligations coming directly from these. But this is landing in very different circumstances. The human rights, fundamental rights actors landscape is unfortunately also quite fragmented. So we have to ensure with this additional monitoring obligation that we don't sort of enhance the fragmentation, but rather try to see holistically that this goes to a place where it strengthens the existing work, it's taking it into account, uses the synergies. At the same time, it also has to be specific. So this is the difficulty. You are combining something which already exists, is quite complicated, fragmented. At the same time, you are again asking for something more from member states and their statutory bodies working on these issues. The good thing is that we have the guidance. It gives the points. Most important ones would be that it has to be independent. It has to be independent from the executive. And then most of the national human rights institutions, ombuds institutions, are set up in such a way that they would fulfill this mandate. But for example, equality bodies rather not. So the independence is very important, as is resources. I think this will be one of the main stumbling blocks. Unfortunately, there may not be a lot of appetite to spend on this type of activity. Because there are many competing demands, and often sort of the security, sort of the reason for this takes precedent over the need to have safeguards, and I think it should be understood that this is an important safeguard for the credibility and functioning of the system. The other issue that I would like to mention is of course the sort of the vulnerable groups and in particular children, where the pact really adds a new good standard that has to be complied with. And this is also, I think, the added value of Fundamental Rights Agency. We don't work in isolation on this issue. We have worked with national member states on integrated child protection with the Commission. And of course, this gives us a good overview of where, again, this obligation is going to be situated. So where you have very weak child protection, of course, this will be more difficult. So I would just like to mention that while we think PACT is, of course, extremely important, it is also coming to a context that already exists with many, many problems and weaknesses. But overall, I welcome it because it gives clarity to well, of course, the main task, which is for the member states, but also the task for the fundamental rights compliance. And I think FRA will be hoping to get a lot of support from the Commission, from the member states, so that we can work together and make sure that within this system, we also still remember that we have to protect rights of people and make a system that respects both rule of law, independence of judiciary was mentioned, but also other elements of rule of law, such as oversight, fundamental rights compliance, and respect for rights of the individuals.
Thank you. No, they're very interesting, and pointing out also the second point, the vulnerable groups, where there is, probably something on, which is new, and we said we speak about law, it's codified, and to explain your role. Stefano, we are sort of on the sort of concrete topics, working with member states. One is you mentioned it's return as well. What does it add now? With the pact in your work with member states, sort of the next steps. What will it change in your work you're doing already, which is ever growing on that side?
Of course. It was said by eloquent speakers before me that the efficiency and efficacy of the return will be fundamental if we really want to test the, let's say, the concrete results on the ground of the measures foreseen in the pact. But let me start by reminding ourselves also the level of support that Frontex already provides in the field of returns, and it is quite a lot. A figure was mentioned, more or less about a quarter of eligible returnees are de facto effectively returned. However, on the positive side, let us not forget that 45%, more or less, of the returns currently taking place is actually supported by Frontex. And this is a service that is very much participated, requested, and appreciated by the member states. And we do this service also taking much care of involving our fundamental rights officers at all stages of the return process. That as a start. From the point of view of our resources, we really dedicate and do not only say it, but mean it and do it. We place an incredibly high priority on returns. We started from a budget of 110 million this year. Sorry, we requested 110 million in 2023 for the current year's budget. We got 93, and through the course of the year we managed to progressively reallocate funds for returns in a manner that now covers much more than the initial budget allocated. We are now at an estimated figure of about 123 million, which we will be able to spend efficiently between now and the end of the year. So in budgetary terms, we really put whatever we can, we put it in returns to make sure that they're actually a priority in what we do. Secondly, also the quality of the support that we give to the member states. I mentioned already very briefly that our support extends from identification missions through the organization of return operations, be that through chartered flights or through scheduled flights, and to reintegration assistance, which is, again, very much a service used by the member states. So what the agency cannot resolve, of course, are the systemic issues that have been explained, so that I don't have to go through in this context. But of course, we work within the policy and legal framework we are given. In that context, you can count on Frontex continued prioritization of return operations, because of course, as we said, it is a crucial part to make sure that the pact happens in reality.
Okay. Thank you. No, absolutely. I mean, I think throughout yesterday, today, I mean, return, even when we wanted to discuss something else, it was always actually on the agenda here. We're very operational level, and I guess, as you said before, you're doing also analysis and you know, and foresight. I mean, the feedback cycle on, you know, through your operations, what it costs, what is needed, I think will be crucial in any discussion in the future as well. Nina, when you are working, you said 120 deliverables. So the question is, no, I mean, with the member states, yeah, I mean, we said, I mean, when you take a little bit of strategic view, it's, yeah, I mean, one could say, well, where to start with the member states when you have 120 deliverables, not only for the member states, also you said, you know, we're working with the Commission, but a bit the strategic view of sort of the entry points, challenges you see with the member states, where to, well, not only to start, to continue your work, which has started many years ago.
Yes, it is a bit of a continuation, and I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have already mentioned, but let me just mention briefly two points that I think are quite relevant, and there it's kind of a, despite the regional differences, of course, there will be definitely key points for the preparation or good preparation for the implementation of the pact. And there are these novelties, of course, that are now that the member states will be bound by the new legislation, and they maybe not have implemented that before, and we also maybe don't have sufficient, let's say, experiences in this respect. I would mention only a few. So the legal counseling during the first instance, that for sure is going to be a novelty in many member states, and of course, indeed, we will need to support that with definitely the guidances, but also maybe operationally. Enhanced information provisions, of course, we do deliver that already in line with, of course, current acquis in many languages and in many shapes and forms, but I think here, of course, enhanced info provisions, they will be also included now in the screening part, and this is something that is new. Then we also, I mean, talking about, or we've talked about the guarantees for vulnerable people, indeed, and it was rightly mentioned by Sirpa that, of course, this is going to be quite important, and of course, they will need to include that, so the member states in the let's say, workflows that, of course, will need to be prepared in a very short period of time. So this is something that, of course, we're trying to work on as an agency. And then the second point that I want to mention is also the large-scale IT systems and the interoperability. I know that this was discussed a bit yesterday, but of course, Eurodac needs to be ready and prepared. Eurodac is going to be a core stone for the interoperability with other IT systems that we have, or we will, I mean, shortly have. I'm mentioning here visa information system, Schengen information system, of course, entry-exit system. So those systems that we have in Europe, they are not interoperable at all. And of course, with that, there are many obstacles that we face now also, and practicalities, but still, for example, in Europe, we still count applications. We don't really count applicants for international protection, yeah? So because of course there is no real interoperability between the systems, and I think that will bring a huge I would say, additional value to the functionality or the migration management, of course. We'll be able also to, in a way, address the areas of internal security, preparedness, and evidence-based policymaking, which already has been mentioned. So in this respect, I think that this, let's say, although maybe technical issues are highly relevant for the good management of the migration in the future, and we will need to be prepared and ready, all of us. So member states, institutions, and also obviously, I mean, Commission and other partners.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think, I mean, now after these two rounds, I think we've shed light on, you know, your roles, on certain aspects which are new, which are critical, which have developed, which are linked, like return, to many other things which are out there already. Now, a last round, sort of quick. I would like to start with Stefano. I mean, you know, I said in the beginning, it would be nice to look a little bit ahead. I mean, what, you know, where does that lead us to? I mean, we say, okay, in 2 years' time, 2026. You know, the easy question would be, okay, would we have then, you know, this system in place? But even look, let's say you normally in a in a job interview, you said, "Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?" No, so but what do we see in 5 years' time? What kind of border management system do you, based on your analysis of the information you have with the things you see which are developing, what kind of border management we will see in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time in Europe?
The million-dollar question.
You are the right person to ask that. That we asked that to you.
First of all, thank you for the question, because it also enables me to point you to one of the key intelligence products that we put on the market, and it's out for the public to read, which is the Strategic Risk Analysis 2024-2025, which is a document that is foreseen in our funding regulation, the recipients of which are the European Commission, the Council and the Parliament, where we actually set, we give the opinion of the EBCG, the European Border and Coast Guard community, as to where we see the challenges in on a 10-year horizon, so even beyond the 5 years that you mentioned. And again, foresight is incredibly important. It's been said by many speakers that have preceded us today. It is important to anticipate challenges before they actually come to the external borders, because what we understand is that being situationally aware is no longer enough. Situational awareness gives you, as the word suggests, an understanding of your immediate surroundings, but it does not help you plan, prevent, and anticipate challenges. So it is incredibly important that we focus on that, and this is why we've also changed a lot our own approach towards intelligence in order to provide exactly the pre-warning function that is needed to then orient a proper operational response at the border and within the Schengen space. That having been said, how do we see the threat landscape in the years to come? And this links to one of the questions that I was asked during the dinner: is what keeps you up at night, given your job title? And of course, it's the situation in third countries outside of the Union. The turmoil that we see at our eastern flank and at our southern borders evidently is a matter that we look at with grave concerns from a variety of points of view. So the so-called Tier 1 of European integrated border management, we really need to pay attention to that, which is the dimension of the countries of origin. Secondly, we're going to live probably in this security situation will have repercussions on the borders. As we have seen, for example, a border section, an entire border region which had been very, very quiet for years on our eastern flank, looks radically different now than it looked 3 years ago, right? So the security paradigm is ever more going to condition the way that we conceive our mission as part of the migration management equation. Secondly, interoperability from a variety of points of view. We will see not only the increased use of technology in a good way, borders being much more interconnected with a better IT infrastructure, with more flow of data, but we can also anticipate that criminals, state actors or non-state actors will also try to do their best to actually change their tactic and bypass the infrastructure and the system that the European Union will put in place to better secure its external borders. So, and these are just two of the ones that come in. And I will conclude with another notion that has been echoed many times, which is the instrumentalization of migration, which, as we know, it's not at all a new phenomenon. We've seen that in history, but the way that it's being used nowadays, it's much different. And this phenomenon, we're afraid it's here to stay for quite some time. So these are just three of the elements that we see between now and, let's say, the next decade.
Thank you, thank you. Well, sort of similar question, but yeah, especially with regard to fundamental rights. I mean, in the system which is being designed, I mean, do you see that fundamental rights will be firmly part of it, that the monitoring of them will be firmly part of them?
Well, I think it will have to be. What is not often discussed is also that fundamental rights, human rights, also are building within it, some flexibility. You have possibilities for restrictions and derogations, and also there is an evolving nature of interpretation. While there are, of course, always some red lines, non-refoulement, not torturing anybody, of course, the legal landscape has also evolved. I think one of the main challenges will be, because this is so complex, we're not only talking about refugee convention or even non-refoulement, we have huge number of different legislative instruments, some very detailed, and all of this is now packaged, but it may even open, more will come. Then how do you keep this together so that there is a sort of the similar understanding of the legislative normative base of this, similar interpretation, and that somehow also the services that ensure that these issues are implemented, these obligations are implemented, are in place. All of this is supposed to happen faster, closer to the borders, with efficiencies, so there will be a lot of challenges. But I think the bottom line is that one of the pillars, the safeguards and rights, if this entirely would fall apart, if this wouldn't work, this system wouldn't have credibility, and I think in the end it would not function well. Or if that would happen, European Union, Europe wouldn't have any more the values, the treaty obligations, the respect for rule of law, fundamental rights, that it is written into its constitutions and treaties. So it's going to be complex, but I think the legal clarity, similar understanding of where we are legally is key, as well as the operational part. And part of that is the respect for fundamental rights.
Thank you. And it's true. You said, it's not only a system; it must be credible system. And here, as you say, fundamental rights are crucial. Time is flying. I still have in mind the 120 deliverables. With the 120 deliverables, I know, but joking aside, 5 years' time, 2 years' time, what will be different when you look? You have, with all the experience you have, we have spoken a lot also on other occasions about the asylum system, what is working, what is not working. How do you see, when you look a little bit in the future, the difference to what we have today?
Yeah, I've been quite often asked this question. In my position as the executive director of the Asylum Agency, so how do you see the forecast? What's the future of the asylum in Europe? And of course, I don't have the crystal ball. It's difficult to reply to that. But I would really want to mention, from our perspective, of course, I would say 3 crucial points. The first point for the agency and also for the system itself is going to be our future monitoring role. According to our own regulation, and let's leave aside the pact and what indeed has been mentioned for the independent monitoring mechanism that will need to be established in the member states. But our agency, in fact, is one of the few decentralized agencies that will have the role to monitor technical implementation of the legislation when it comes to common European asylum system. So we have prepared monitoring methodology, and this has been adopted in March of this year by our management board. And indeed, we do have the plan for the monitoring of the implementation of the legislation as such. So we also have, we'll start with pilot projects on the basis of the, let's say, old or the current legislation, with 2 member states that have, in a way, identified themselves as a proper, maybe, pilot project, let's say, experience. And this is the Netherlands and Estonia, and we're very grateful to them that indeed they will embark in this quite exciting situation for the agency, but also for the member states. And of course, we will also then in the future monitor the implementation of the pact. We are not the guardians of the treaty, of course, that's in the hands of the Commission, but technical work in a way is going to be done by the agency, and we are really happy to have this, let's say, opportunity and mandate. The second point that I want to mention, and this is definitely what we are looking forward very much in the years to come, is the convergence. As I said at the beginning, and I do believe that, of course, PACT will bring now the good basis for convergence, and we will be able to align, so the member states to align more in the practical implementation of the legislation, and hopefully, of course, with that, we will also be able to address quite critical issues such as secondary movements, and of course also then the discussions regarding that. And we will also be able with that to minimize the risk of misuse and abuse of the systems. Of course, we will be able to better address the situation with smuggling and of course fighting the organized crime in this respect. And we do believe that people will be able to receive international protection in a timely manner, and we hope that we will be able to return those not in need of protection. And the third point that I want to mention, I mean, in a way, of course, it's the future discussion on the innovative solutions, if I may quote them like that. I really strongly believe that this needs to happen. So the pact and the implementation of the pact is an internal tool for the processes that we have in Europe. But I strongly believe that we should embark in the open discussion about the innovative solutions, the partnerships with third countries. How can we design multi-purpose hubs? So what are the return hubs? How can we define that, of course, in the frame of the current conventions? And there, I think the agency will play quite an important role in the future also. And the fourth part that I really want to mention, and it comes from my heart as a long-standing practitioner in the field of asylum and migration, is the discussion about hopefully future discussion about the mutual recognition of the asylum status in Europe. The future discussion also on the free movement of refugees or acknowledged refugees in Europe. And maybe the future discussion on so-called Europeanization of asylum procedures that, of course, the pact is going to be a basis for. So that's my hope, let's say, for the, let's say, future open and dialogue and discussion, and hopefully maybe we will be able to discuss this also next time in Vienna Migration Conference.
Or in 5 years' time.
Yes.
But, thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes to open up for, I think, one round of questions. If there's a question, a comment, to the point, to any of the panelists. Otherwise, the following panel will be very happy that we will be on time, actually. If there's no urgent question, or there is? No, someone is moving, but no. You don't force yourself. You have been very attentive listeners. Thank you very much. But please join me really in thanking the three panelists. I think it has really given a very good insight in the current phase where we are with the pact. And as I said before, personally, I do think it is wrong to say implementation will start. No, implementation has started. It's happening.
True.
It's probably certain things are difficult to communicate, to show, but to the extent, and we discussed it before also with Johannes, the extent how far-reaching it is, actually the provisions of the pact, yeah, it will be interesting to convene regularly and actually to monitor and to discuss the progress of the pact. But please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thanks,
It's been
Rob.
fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks. Thank you.